About 5 years ago, I was invited to a wedding approximately 17 hours away by car. To save some money, I decided to drive instead of flying. My original plan was to drive all day, but after about 14 hours, I became too sleepy to continue. Knowing that driving further would be dangerous, I decided to pull over at the next rest stop to catch some sleep. At that moment, I wasn't sure exactly where I was, but it seemed to be a very quiet area. As I turned into the rest stop, I noticed I was the only person there. The lighting was dim, and there was a small building with a restroom, a vending machine, and some advertising flyers. After parking, I quickly checked my phone for nearby hotels, but the closest one was a 20-minute drive away, and I was far too tired to keep my eyes open much longer. So, I had no choice but to rest there. I walked into the restroom, then returned to my car and reclined the seat to lie down. Almost immediately, I fell asleep. I usually dislike sleeping in cars because it's uncomfortable, but that night, it was my only option. I slept soundly until I was jolted awake in the middle of the night by a sound that seemed like someone trying to open the driver's side door. I quickly adjusted the seat to sit up and looked outside, but saw nothing but the empty parking lot. Confused, I wondered if I had imagined the noise. I sat there for a while, but saw or heard nothing else, so I tried to go back to sleep. However, I felt increasingly uneasy and couldn't fall back asleep. Seeing that it was already 5 a.m. on my phone, I decided to get something to drink from the rest stop, and then finish the last leg of my drive. I stepped out of my car and bought a coffee from the vending machine. As I walked back to my car, I thought I saw something like a person hiding under it. It was still quite dark, but I could see an arm moving behind one of the tires. Terrified, I ran back to the restroom and locked myself in a stall. There were no other cars in the parking lot, and no one was inside the rest stop, which made the situation even scarier. I waited, hoping the person would leave. The longer I sat there, the more frightened I became. Then, I heard the restroom door open and someone enter. My heart sank. I lifted my feet off the floor to avoid being seen if the person peeked under the stall doors. I heard footsteps pacing around, then coming closer. Suddenly, the person entered the restroom where I was hiding. The fear was overwhelming. I quietly held the stall door shut from the inside, while the person walked around the restroom, then heard what sounded like him lying down on the floor. It seemed he might check each stall to find me. Deciding I had to act quickly, I burst out of the stall and sprinted out of the restroom. As I did, I heard the person stand and start chasing me. I ran out of the building, hurried to my car, heard a man screaming madly behind me, got into my car, started it, and drove away as fast as I could. At that moment, I saw him running after me. He looked very angry and dangerous. I escaped, but it was probably the scariest moment of my life. This happened years ago when I was young and studying at university. During the summer, I worked at a sports stadium in the city where they held extra matches in the evenings to make more money. This meant I would drive home very late, usually reaching my parents' house after midnight. It was about a 40-minute drive from work, but late at night, I could make it in under 30 minutes since the roads were typically empty at that hour. One night, as I was driving home after a late game, I had reached halfway when the surroundings gradually shifted from urban streets to the suburban roads, where mine was the only car under the shadowy trees. As I drove, it seemed I saw something on the road ahead and I began to slow down. It looked like a person, but as I got closer, it appeared to be a man dressed as a clown. He was wearing a mask and a full clown suit, even holding several balloons. I almost had to stop because the clown stood facing the woods but in the middle of my lane. As I got closer, he slowly turned towards me, which really frightened me. I started driving at maybe 5 miles an hour, moving into the opposite lane to pass him when he began walking towards me. He moved so slowly that I quickly sped up and drove away. As I drove, I thought over and over about how terrifying it was. A clown suddenly appearing in the middle of a deserted forest with no cars or parking areas nearby. I couldn't imagine why he was there. There were no houses or businesses in the area, and I was relieved to have escaped from him. Suddenly, I heard the noise my car makes when it's about to run out of gas, and looking down, I saw the fuel gauge was nearly empty. I pulled into the next gas station, a small quiet one with just a pumps and no one else around. I paid and filled up my tank. Just as I was about to return to my car, I heard a noise from the wooded area across the street from the station. I saw the clown from earlier peeking out from behind a tree, staring at me. It was very dark, so at first, I took a minute to realize what it was. After making eye contact with the clown, he burst out from behind the tree and started sprinting towards me. Terrified, I quickly got into my car, started it, and drove off as fast as possible. I drove home and fortunately, my parents were still awake. They helped me calm down. I never encountered that clown again, and I have no idea who he was or how he got to the gas station so quickly. Most kids play the old trick of ringing doorbells and running away between the ages of 10 and 14, but my friends and I were still at it at 16, during our high school years. We lived in what many would consider a typical middle-class suburban area, where most houses were pretty standard and similar to each other. However, there was one house, just a few blocks from mine, known for its distinct and seemingly much older architectural style compared to the rest. This house had had a for sale sign up for quite a while, and about a year after the sign disappeared, our story begins. We weren't sure if anyone had moved in, as the lawn never seemed to be mowed. One peaceful weekend night, my two friends and I decided to target this house to play our doorbell prank, partly because it stood out, and we wondered if anyone actually lived there, or if perhaps something more mysterious was hidden inside. In our game, we had a rule that each person must ring the bell at least once. My friend Jerry went first. He tried to ring the bell, but it seemed non-functional, so we opted to knock instead. He knocked loudly, and then quickly retreated to the bushes where we were hiding. We waited a minute, but no one answered. Then it was my turn. I ran up to the front door, and instead of knocking, I punched the door hard, which caused it to open slightly, almost giving me a heart attack, and I quickly dashed back to the bushes next to Jerry and Eric. We crouched and waited for someone to come out, but the door just stood still, slightly ajar, maybe 1 or 2 inches open. I guess I had hit it so hard that it came off the latch. At this point, we started to wonder if anyone was actually living there, as there were no cars in the driveway or parked on the street. Emboldened by the lack of response, we came up with the foolish idea to enter the house since no one seemed to appear after our knocks. I went first, quietly pushing the door open and stepping into the living room. There wasn't much furniture, just a few wooden chairs and an old-style coffee table set in the middle of the room. The moonlight mixed with the streetlight streaming through the windows provided enough light for us to see. Even without flashlights, we tiptoed into the kitchen, where we were met with a terrible stench. It smelled rotten. When we opened the refrigerator, we found the source, a pile of spoiled, expired food emitting a putrid smell, milk mixed with rotting meat. Clearly, the refrigerator had been off for some time, confirming no one lived there, which somewhat relieved us, thinking maybe no one else was in the house with us. We then decided to explore the upstairs, feeling a bit more relaxed about moving around. The house wasn't small, and with all the upstairs doors closed, opening them felt a bit eerie. The three of us split up to check the rooms for anything interesting. I moved from one bedroom to another and entered a room with the door already open. Maybe Jerry or Eric had been there before me. In the corner was a small cupboard and an old bed, and I could see marks on the floor where a bed had once been. Then I heard a creak in the room. It was of medium size, and none of my friends were there. I noticed a large, dark cavity in the wall. It was really a massive hole leading into the interior of the walls, pitch black inside. As I got closer, I heard something like breathing. I thought it might be one of my friends trying to scare me, but when I called their names, they both answered from different rooms. I immediately realized what that meant, and suddenly, a thought struck me. While most people would have run, I moved a few steps closer to the suspicious hole. My friends entered the room behind me, giving me a bit more confidence to approach closer. I was about 4 feet from the hole when I thought I saw something move. My friends whispered, asking if I saw anything. Foolishly, I moved closer. Now, I was about 2 feet away when suddenly, an arm reached out from the darkness and grabbed my shirt. My friends panicked and rushed over to help. According to Jerry, he scratched at the pale, wrinkled arm, and it let go. We hurriedly ran downstairs and out the front door, then sprinted away from the house. We considered calling the police, but given the possibility that someone might actually live there, our actions could be seen as breaking and entering. So we agreed not to tell our parents or anyone else about it. It could get us into trouble.